Hi, I'm Lubomir. Follow me to the next topic. Part 5 Alogodics. In this installment, I'll cover another unique and no less brilliant spiritual journey than the previous two. Of course, there can be many spiritual journeys, and how that journey is described depends only on the approach of the one who has taken the journey. One of these people is Ivan Špička. Since he is a man living in a more recent era, his unique approach reflects a modern description that suits the Western way of thinking. His brilliant natural reason, which hand in hand with a tremendous disposition to realize the reason of the supernatural, created the conditions for him to make his journey and then to describe it in a way that has not been done before. This is probably the most accurate way of leading to enlightenment. In order to accomplish such a difficult task, he had to create his own terminology. He created new words that are not to be found elsewhere than in his work. He wrote several books, but due to their difficulty in terms of both content and words, since many words cannot be found in any dictionary, these books are only available in the original Czech language. I personally was not under his tutelage as a student, but I was privileged to have had an interview with him. I will try to give at least a very general account of his way of describing the spiritual path. Although very few people have access to the literature of which he is the author, it is certainly worth my while to present this path. It is this path that I have let myself be guided on. Ivan Špička called this path Alogodica. It will probably come as no surprise to anyone that it is a verbal combination of the letter A in the negative and the word logos, which means word in Latin. Again, we encounter hints that what is important is inexpressible and hidden by words. For the dissemination of Alogodics, he considered the study of self-defense to be the most advantageous. Adepts of self-defense are usually not even aware that it is through this study that they are preparing themselves for a much more important and demanding study, Alogodica in its deepest sense. As I have already mentioned, in Japanese Zen Buddhism, the basic clash of life and death that every warrior faces is utilized here. It makes absolutely no difference whether he fights with or without a weapon. In such a situation, he always faces the risk of losing his life. Therefore, such a fight requires perfect concentration. The mind of the warrior must be completely free, devoid of any thoughts. Only a mind free of thoughts can react instantly to a changing situation. The reaction comes on the basis of patterns trained over years, which are triggered as needed without the need to think of these patterns. Ivan Špička has devised an entirely new combat system based on a scientific approach to each and every detail contained in the system. Each move has a precise path designed to be as efficient as possible. In the case of punches and kicks, that means as fast and efficient as possible. By efficiency, we mean transferring kinetic energy in the shortest possible time to convert it into strain energy. This is just one example of this man's approach to the procedure of how to design an optimal fighting system and thus maximize the probability of winning or at least a draw under self-defense conditions. Adepts of self-defense are encouraged to practice concentration in addition to practicing self-defense itself. This exercise is identical in nature to the breathing exercises practiced in Buddhism or yoga. It is an entry into the mind space where most people realize that they are not only the body but also the mind, and that if they are somehow in control of the body, they certainly can't say that about the mind. They find that they don't rule their own mind, and it does whatever it wants. It produces one thought after another, and these form a continuous chain, binding us together and keeping us so deluded about who we are. Alogodics contains the exact procedure for breaking out of delusion and realizing the true subject, which is identical with enlightenment, our true ultimate goal. It describes each stage of knowledge through which we approach this goal. It lists and names these stages with surgical precision. Although the actual experience in the realization of these stages is far beyond the limits of reason using ideas and hence thinking as such, the author of the Alogodica is nevertheless capable of excellent verbal description. And it is this approach, which is quite different from, for example, Buddhism, that makes him exceptional. Since most people do not have access to this author's books, this time I will include a few quotes and thus convey at least a small sample of his work. Finding quotes that do not contain the special terminology created by the author is not easy, since all his works are based on it. He created words that he used as bricks to build a house, his message. His construction hides wisdom, but it is not the construction, but it is contained in the construction. And here are a couple of quotes. Man's basic frustration is rooted in the contradiction of being and non-being. This contradiction can begin to be revealed by the subject through reflection or meditation, especially in the 3 periods of life. In adolescence, when he recognizes the infinity of needs overwhelming the finite body. At the beginning of adulthood, when he recognizes the limitlessness of anticipations affecting the limited mind, and in adulthood, when he recognizes death as the limit of activity. Only then does the spiritual life begin to open up to him. A man is a personality when he is rational, when he first thinks and then acts, his will, guided by reason, reaching the ultimate goal. Man has 2 levels of mental faculties, a lower level involving the power of cognition, the senses, and the lusts of the senses, the higher spiritual level involving reason, the lusts of the intellect, the rational will. Reason and the free will that springs from it are absolutely essential for the spiritual path. The basic means of the spiritual path are concentration, reading spiritual literature, reflection and conversation with the Master, asceticism, followed by concentration on one's own subject, vigilance, meditation, and contemplation. The mental interventions of the true spiritual path, that is, the use of the concrete means of the spiritual path, require perfect guidance. Without such guidance, it is extremely easy to go astray. Man is a question after the reality of himself. To be human is to be this question, to be mortally wounded within himself by the unbridgeable gulf separating him from himself. The question after the reality of the self is the question after the meaning of the self, and therefore the question after the meaning of death, and therefore the meaning of life. The answer to this question is the liberation of the mind of the subject, which means the radical transformation of the subject into a new man, a new being. Lo, this path is not the romantic path of the immortal soul to the eternal possession of God, nor the path of blind hope in the promises at the end of the ages, nor the religious path of I or we saving for an afterlife, nor the path of faith in faith and apostles or anyone else. These were and are the paths of a crippled or incomplete or misunderstood Christianity. The message of Jesus Christ and the true meaning of the message of the spiritual geniuses of all ages is the irreversible transformation of the mind into the mind of Christ through mystical death. The mystical life is the existential essence of the Christian life, for it is its organic culmination. If life is not effectively oriented toward the mystical life, it is neither spiritual nor Christian. The crippled mind is capable only of faith, emptied to an uncertain hope, and this is necessarily drowned in doubt, and then there is nothing left but to seek a fictitious refuge in mere wanting, and to say that the essence of Christianity is to love one another, but simply and unequivocally the essence of Christianity is not to love one another. God is love, but it is not true that love is God. All evil comes from blinded love. Sin is love gone astray, which is not the fruit of truth, of reason enlightened by faith and known by the gifts of the Holy Spirit. In contemplation, to which everyone is called, because it is on the normal line of holiness, faith even reaches God Himself through the dark light of mystical experience. I am nothing without form, nothing without a place in God, and without a place outside of God and within myself, nothing to the point of utter nothingness, nothing turned into nothing by God, nothing permeated by God, like the absolutely transparent glass of a wine-filled goblet, the clear flow of divine activity without bounds. So those were a few quotes. Release the grip in your mind, be well,